Doctor, when we left off, you had described all the injuries to the exterior of Mr. O'Keefe, and we had talked about your observations of both the fractures in his skull and also your observation of Mr. O'Keefe's brain. You mentioned earlier that you used other resources, other testing. Did you ask for any type of assistance on toxicology analysis for Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, it is routine, and it is protocol to submit toxicology specimens to the lab for examination.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Doctor, I'm handing you a document. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the report of toxicology from the State Police Crime Lab for Mr. O'Keefe's autopsy.
Have you seen that document before?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the report we saw before?
Yes.
Do you want to introduce this as the next exhibit, please?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Exhibit 161.
Thank you. I have that in front of me. Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In your experience, Doctor, are you familiar what the toxicology report and the testing involves?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Are you familiar in your experience with what is involved in a toxicology test?
In general terms, yes.
And if you studied Mr. O'Keefe's toxicology report, was that important or part of your analysis in your ultimate conclusions?
It was one piece of evidence that I took into consideration, yes.
In the toxicology testing, is there a search to see if there are any type of drugs or medications in Mr. O'Keefe's blood?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any?
There were no prescription medications. There were no illicit drugs in his system.
In a toxicology, is there also a testing for blood alcohol content?
Yes.
What is the difference between ethanol in heart blood and ethanol under 1102?
In vitreous humor?
Yes.
So we usually submit multiple specimens for toxicology. Some of the specimens are used for screening of classes of different drugs, and then other specimens are used to confirm, the presence and quantify a particular drug. So in this particular case, the lab tested the heart blood, which showed that it had an ethanol level of 0.21 grams per deciliter. And they also tested the vitreous, which is the fluid that sits behind the eyeball. And in that specimen, the ethanol was slightly higher at 0.28.
Thank you, Doctor. After your autopsy and observations of Mr. O'Keefe's body, inevitably did you come to a conclusion about the manner and cause of Mr. O'Keefe's death? And I'll ask you first about the cause. To a reasonable degree of medical certainty, did you reach a conclusion about the cause of Mr. O'Keefe's death?
Yes. The cause of death was determined to be blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia.
You mentioned two different things, blunt impact and hypothermia. Was
Correct.
there a primary cause of death in your opinion?
The blunt impact injuries of head.
Hypothermia, was that sufficient to be a primary cause of death in your opinion?
In the absence of head trauma, hypothermia is a cause of death. but I'm not able to make that determination in this case because we do have the blunt impact injuries of head.
So if I understand, you are not saying to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that hypothermia was the cause of death?
Not the primary. It contributed, but the primary cause of death was blunt impact injuries of head.
Did you learn what Mr. O'Keefe's body temperature was when he was brought to the hospital?
Yes, some of the medical records stated that his body temperature was 80.1, I believe, degrees Fahrenheit.
And what is a normal body temperature?
98.6.
Regarding the blunt force injuries as the cause of death to Mr. O'Keefe, at some point when you were conducting your autopsy, or even at the end when you drew your conclusions, were you able to reach a conclusion as to the manner of Mr. O'Keefe's death to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
No, I was not.
After you complete your findings, including the manner of death and the cause of death, even if undetermined, are you required by statute, by law, to file a report or a document?
Yes,
And what is that document?
it's the death certificate.
Did you do so in this case?
Yes.
When you file a death certificate, do you include your ultimate conclusions regarding cause and manner of death?
Yes, there is a death certificate that is issued immediately after the autopsy. The death certificate is a document that is necessary for the family in order to make funeral arrangements and proceed with their plans. So a death certificate is always issued at the end of the autopsy. If the cause and manner of death are known at that point, they are stated on the death certificate. If they are not, or if we need to do additional studies, then both the cause and the manner are listed as pending. And that death certificate is sufficient for the family to make arrangements. Later, as we get more information, as we get more results from our studies back, we issue an amended death certificate. So that amended death certificate will have a cause and a manner. The amended death certificate, in this case, stated that the cause was blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia, and the manner was undetermined.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm handing you a document. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And what is it?
This is the final or amended death certificate for Mr. O'Keefe, stating that the cause of death is blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia, and that the manner of death could not be determined.
Do you recognize that document as accurate?
Yes.
Your Honor, move this into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Exhibit 162.
After issuing the death certificate and after the 90 days passed, have you done any further study or investigation on this case, Doctor?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
We have not had the pleasure of meeting, so good morning, Dr. Scordi-Bello.
Good morning.
With regard to cause of death as opposed to manner of death, is it correct that a forensic pathologist is tasked with determining that cause of death that includes contributing factors, injuries, and circumstances regarding the medical legal death investigation? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And I'm using the term medico legal. Is that a term that you're familiar with?
Yes.
And is it correct that medical legal means, particularly for medical examiners, that there's a medical aspect to the investigation that you perform, and there's also a legal aspect or a law enforcement aspect to it? Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's a little different than what physicians usually do, right? Because isn't it the ordinary course that it's mostly just medical, but medical examiners by statute and law need to have both of those prongs taken into consideration? Do I have that right?
Yes.
So, in other words, the forensic pathologist, which you've indicated you are, is tasked with determining the cause of death, which answers the question as to why, in more layman's terms, why did the individual's body stop functioning at a particular time, correct?
Yes.
So more broadly, the cause of death is generally defined as the disease or the injury that resulted in the death of a person.
Correct.
So let's now, if we could please, move to the manner of death. And I'd like to summarize, I know you covered it on direct, but I want to put it in a slightly different context, and hopefully I'll get it right. So medical examiners, as you've stated, are also tasked with, if they can, determining the manner of death or the circumstances under which the death occurred, correct?
Correct.
So manner can and does involve the circumstances under which the death occurred.
Yes.
And that causes one to go the medical examiner to go beyond just medical analysis. You take into consideration other factors which we'll get to. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you talked about, and I'm just going to go through them quickly, but if you could just check me on this, the 5 main categories of manner of death. So you talked about natural causes, correct?
Yes.
You talked about accident.
Correct.
You talked about suicide. You talked about homicide. And then the last category, undetermined. Do I have that correct?
Yes, you do.
So what I'd like to do is to focus on the undetermined category. And my understanding is, Doctor, that that's where you landed, that's where you concluded with regard to manner of death of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
So undetermined is a term that is used and that you use, and does that mean that when the information pointing to one manner is not more compelling than other reasonable possibilities, or the death investigation lacks sufficient information to opine on a manner of death, at the time of death, the certificate is signed? Is that generally correct?
Yes.
So, as we've talked about, I'm just trying to follow or just develop some logic and see if this is in agreement with you, that as a medical examiner, you're specifically tasked with conducting that medical legal investigation, and what we've just talked about is a bit of the method of analysis that you go through for that, correct?
I conduct the autopsy, and I request information information from the investigative body that is out there investigating the other aspect of the case, not the body itself.
Yes. So, is it correct that there's 4 general components to a forensic pathologist death investigation? Is scene investigation one of the components?
It depends on the jurisdiction where you practice. Scene investigation is part of forensic pathology in certain jurisdictions, and it is the responsibility of the district attorney and law enforcement in other jurisdictions. In the state of Massachusetts, we are responsible for the autopsy, and the DA's office and law enforcement are responsible for the scene investigation.
Excellent. So scene investigation in the state of Massachusetts is not within your domain in the office of the medical examiner. That is the domain of the district attorney and law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
How about another aspect, forensic autopsy and laboratory testing? That's within your domain, correct?
Correct.
And how about police reports and witness statements?
That is not under my jurisdiction. That is under the district attorney's office and the police.
Do you consider information, nonetheless, from police reports and witness statements in your analysis?
Yes.
And do you also consider, even though it's not within your jurisdiction in Massachusetts, do you also consider information about scene investigation?
Yes.
So it's correct then that you consider, whether it's within your jurisdiction or not, you consider scene investigation and police reports and medical statements, correct?
Yes.
And then forensic autopsy and laboratory testing is right within your jurisdiction, and therefore, of course, you consider that. And then lastly, medical history and hospital records, is it, therefore, am I correct that that's something within your jurisdiction and that you consider in performing your forensic pathologist death investigation?
Yes.
So now let's move on to the application of those principles. So in order to conduct a proper medical legal investigation, the medical examiner has to have certain qualities, if you will. Is one of them being well-grounded in general medical knowledge?
Yes.
Is another appropriate training and experience in forensic pathology?
Yes.
In other words, you wouldn't want a specialist, for example, in cardiology without anything more to be conducting a death investigation. Is that correct?
I would not want them to be conducting an autopsy. Correct.
Right. Would you want a neurologist to conduct a death investigation?
Personally, or are you asking me that? No, I don't think every physician has their specialty and their training, and forensic pathologists are trained to perform autopsies, and cardiac surgeons are trained to perform cardiac surgery.
Would you want a neurosurgeon to be conducting a death investigation?
To be performing an autopsy? No.
So you wouldn't want a neurosurgeon to perform an autopsy?
No.
Because you don't believe they're qualified to do so, correct?
I don't believe they've had the appropriate training to perform an autopsy.
Going back into the many qualities of a medical examiner and attributes, they also have to have the ability to form opinions based upon all the available information using the scientific method along with sound reasoning. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the term scientific method?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that the scientific method generally is sort of a systematic pursuit of knowledge that involves recognition and definition of a problem? Is that fair?
Yes.
Is it also involve the collection of data through observation and experimentation where appropriate?
Correct.
Does the scientific method also include the analysis of data?
Yes.
Does the scientific method also include the formulation, evaluation, and testing of hypotheses?
Yes.
And does it also, where possible, include the selection of a final hypothesis after considering other hypotheses?
Correct.
So what we've just discussed is a fair explication, a fair explanation of the scientific method.
Correct.
And the scientific method is part of the autopsy and forensic pathology analysis, correct?
Correct.
Now, applying one concept, that medical legal concept we talked about, just holding for a moment, if you could, the medical and going to the legal, if you will, law enforcement that you said in Massachusetts is not under your jurisdiction, but nonetheless you consider information arising from it.
Yes.
Are you familiar with a person named Michael Proctor? Is that name familiar to you?
Yes, it is.
And at one time, Michael Proctor was a trooper, correct?
Correct.
And so did former Trooper Proctor inform you of the working law enforcement theory at the time of the investigation of this matter, namely his working theory, collision of a motor vehicle with a pedestrian? Did he inform you of that?
He informed our office of that, yes.
He informed your office. And is it fair to say that he informed your office or provided that information to your office in or about February of 2022?
That information, part of that information was provided to our office at the time of the autopsy. One of the pieces of information that had come in, and there were multiple sources calling into our office, providing information, was that this was a possible person struck by a motor vehicle.
And the time of the autopsy, if I have it correctly, was that around the end of January of 2022?
The autopsy was January 31st.
Your Honor, if I could, with your permission, please publish a photograph which Your Honor has and the parties have stipulated, or that's in evidence. And this is the one. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I show that to the witness?
Okay. All right, so we will mark this as the next exhibit. There's no objections to Brendan?
No objection.
Okay, so we'll mark it first and then you can display it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Exhibit 163.
Thank you. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Scordi-Bello, if I could hand that to you, please. You could take a look at it, and when you've had a fair opportunity to look at it, you can just look back up, and I'll proceed at that time.
Yes, I recognize the picture. Well, I've never seen this picture before, but I know what it's depicting.
Thank you. What is depicted in that picture?
It's a picture of two individuals standing in a morgue setting, which looks very similar to our morgue at the Cape Cod office.
Very good. If you could just hold that for a moment, and with the court's permission, could I publish that for the jury?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf? And if you could please zoom in on the two individuals in that picture. Dr. Scordi-Bello, do you recognize any of the individuals in that picture?
To be perfectly honest, no, I don't.
With regard to the person on the right, do you recognize that person?
No, I don't.
And you said you recognized the setting, correct?
Yes.
And you, if I heard you correctly, you said this is the Cape Cod facility?
It appears to be, correct.
Right. So you testified earlier, if I recall correctly, that the autopsy was performed at the Cape Cod facility of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner?
Yes, it was.
And you're normally in, as I recall, the Westfield, in an office that covers Western Massachusetts and Westfield?
Correct.
But you were at the Cape Cod facility, as I understand it, because there was a staff shortage and you had to travel down to Cape Cod for this. Is this correct?
Correct.
So you weren't at your normal home-based sort of facility. This is a facility that you went to for this autopsy, correct?
For this autopsy and multiple others, yes.
Yes. And you were covering a staff shortage, and that was the reason you went to Cape Cod, correct?
Correct.
And what's depicted in this picture are two individuals. For two individuals to be present Is there a protocol that they had to follow to be present for that, like a sign-in or an authorization?
Yes, there is a sign-in sheet that individuals have to put their name and their shield number and before they can come into the autopsy room.
So they have to put a shield number down, correct? You mentioned a shield number.
Yes,
And does that therefore mean that even though you don't know who they are, that they are with law enforcement? Are you able to determine that?
correct. I believe they were with law enforcement.
So those two individuals were with law enforcement, but you don't know who
I
they
don't-
are.
I don't know who they are specifically and what their actual position was.
But they were with law enforcement.
I believe, if my memory serves me right, there was a person from crime scene investigation and someone from state police.
Thank
But I'm working on a 2+ year memory.
Fair. That's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to ask you more questions to probe the memory. We can take that down. And yeah, we are finished with that. If you could hand that to the, thank you. Now, we were speaking about former Trooper Proctor. Do you recall former Trooper Proctor sending you a copy of scene photographs and wanting to schedule a phone call with you so that he could explain the status of his investigation? Do you recall that?
Yes,
And that occurred approximately in March of 2022?
yes, approximately.
Right, and the method of communication of that was that by email, to the best of your recollection?
I requested that our medical legal investigator, we have our own investigators at the office that are responsible for obtaining medical records and sometimes being the liaison between us and law enforcement to get reports. I requested that she contact whoever was in charge of the investigation and set up a meeting, a phone call. So since it had already been a few weeks since the autopsy, I wanted to make sure that if there was any additional information that could be provided to me, I could take it into account because I had 90 days to issue a report and a death certificate on this case.
Now, you've mentioned the 90 days on direct, you just mentioned it now. Is the 90 days a hard and fast rule, or is it just something you aspire to as a matter of good practices?
It's not a hard and fast rule. It's something that as an office we try to achieve. Again, the reason being that there are family members, next of kin that are waiting for these reports and these death certificates for various reasons. So is it possible to go over the 90 days? Absolutely, if necessary. But we do try to finish our part in those 90 days.
So it's possible to go past the 90 days, but there would, given the considerations you just articulated, there'd have to be a pretty good reason why you'd want to do that, right?
Correct.
And in this situation, you concluded that you had sufficient information on the medical side and the legal side to come to the conclusions that you needed to come to. Is that fair?
Well, I had sufficient information on the medical side because I did the autopsy and I had those findings. I did not have sufficient information that pointed to one manner of death over another manner of death. And therefore, I stated that the manner of death was undetermined.
Exactly. So the manner of death is undetermined, and I want to, if I could with you, pursue that a little bit in a moment. But when you came toward the end of that 90-day period, you had information from the law enforcement side on their theory of what had happened, correct?
Correct.
I'll let that one stand.
You had performed all of the medical investigation and analysis that you needed to perform, is that correct?
Yes.
There wasn't something more that you wanted to do on the medical side. You had mentioned, to be fair, you had Dr. Stonebridge involved as well. You had what you needed on that side, correct?
Yes.
And you therefore concluded on the manner of death that there was a not more compelling or more likely than other reasonable possibilities. Is that fair?
Yes.
So in furtherance of that, on April 14th of 2022, you issued a death certificate, correct?
Yes.
And please feel free to check your report of any dates or any other particular as I go through.
Okay. I issued my final report on April 14th, correct, and I would assume that the death certificate was on or around that same day.
Thank you. Now, to back up a little bit with regard to the autopsy, as you stated, it was conducted, I just want to do a little bit of a timeline, on January 31st of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And we discussed that the body of Mr. O'Keefe was presented to the Cape Cod location, correct?
Yes.
And you also discussed that you brought Dr. Stonebridge to work with you on this matter, correct?
She didn't physically come to the office. The way Dr. Stonebridge was involved is at the time of autopsy when the brain was removed. Having seen that there were injuries, I saved the brain in a special solution, and then the brain was transported to our facility in Boston. That's where Dr. Stonebridge examines the specimens. And after examining the brain, she issued a report.
Who asked Dr. Stonebridge to become involved in the matter?
I did.
And Dr. Stonebridge is triple board certified, correct?
Correct.
She's a forensic pathologist, correct?
Yes.
That means she's achieved board certification in forensic pathology like you?
Do you know that?
I do.
I'll allow that.
Yes, she is board certified in forensic pathology.
And she is board certified in general pathology, correct?
Yes.
And she's board certified in neuropathology, correct?
Correct.
Can you briefly describe to the jury what neuropathology is?
Neuropathology is a subset or specific additional training in forensic pathology where the person spends a considerable amount of time, usually 1 to 2 years, examining brains and learning all about the diseases of the brain as well as trauma to the brain.
Now, you asked her to be involved, as you indicated earlier, correct?
Yes.
And you determined that she should be involved because there was a brain injury, correct?
There was trauma to the brain, correct?
Trauma to the brain. Is it a fair characterization that Dr. Stonebridge is sort of the brains of the brain area of autopsy? Is that fair?
I'm going to sustain the objection. Let's move on.
So, with regard to Dr. Stonebridge, would you agree that she's really uniquely qualified in some ways? Or how would you describe her qualifications, Dr. Stonebridge?
Sustained.
With regard to Dr. Stonebridge, what did she do?
I'm going to see you at sidebar on this, please.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Scordi-Bello, have you, are you aware of an attorney name, or excuse me, a doctor named Zeke Wolf?
No, I'm not.
Now I'd like to move on to another category. Based on the information that was presented to you as part of your examination and analysis, is it correct that you presume that because Mr. O'Keefe's body was found in the snow and his body temperature was 80 degrees, that he died from hypothermia as one of the causes?
I reached that conclusion after performing the autopsy and after seeing some findings that were consistent with hypothermia and then combined with the information that was provided to me about Mr. O'Keefe's body being found in the snow, I came to the conclusion that was one of the things that contributed.
Did you consider whether there may have been other reasons as to why his body reached that temperature of 80 degrees? Sort of applying the scientific method and seeing if there were other reasons?
Other than being out in the snow? No, I do not.
Do you know whether there are other alternative reasons how his body could reach the temperature of 80 degrees?
People can become hypothermic for other reasons such as sepsis, but in this particular case, I didn't have any reason to believe that that was part of the circumstances.
You're familiar with the medical phrase differential diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
And a differential diagnosis is a term that's used by doctors to pursue other potential causes of a medical injury. Is that a fair general statement?
Yes.
So, for example, if somebody is having difficulty breathing, a doctor may say, I think it's the heart is their primary hypothesis, but they may want to differentially diagnose this and look at the lungs. Is that an example of a differential diagnosis let's look at the lungs to see if that may be the problem? Is that a good, fair example?
In the example you're giving, yes.
So applying that concept, and do you believe the concept of, applying that concept to this situation, did you perform a differential diagnosis as to the cause of the death and question whether there was hypothermia as any cause of the death of the decedent? Did you make that analysis?
I looked at the anatomic findings that I had at the time of autopsy, the information that was provided to me based on the circumstances and where the body was found, and I came to the conclusion that there were hypothermic changes in Mr. O'Keefe's body.
So you just used the phrase hypothermic changes. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Can there be hypothermic changes without a cause of death being hypothermia?
Yes, of course.
So you can have signs in the body of hypothermia, but you can also conclude that a cause of death is not from hypothermia, correct?
If the person is deceased and I am examining the body and there are multiple things that I believe contribute to the death, then I tend to include all of them. Meaning that if this was a drug intoxication and the body also showed signs of hypothermia, I would include both of them on the death certificate because there is no scientific way of teasing out whether it was just one or the other or both. In this particular case, I had two processes that were going on. One was the head trauma, and the other one were these hypothermic changes. I put all that together, and again, included or took into account the investigative information of where the body was found, what the temperature was when the body was found, whether the person was still alive or not, and I came to the conclusion that the cause of death was blunt impact injuries of head, and I included the hypothermia because I saw during the autopsy that there were changes consistent with hypothermia.
So I want to break that down a little bit, if I could, with you. So you testified on direct, and I think you alluded to it here, that the primary cause of death, use that phraseology on direct, was blunt force injury. Is that correct?
Blunt impact injuries to the head, yes.
Blunt impact injuries to the head, and that's the primary cause, right?
Correct.
And then there's, and I'm not clear on what you refer to on direct as a secondary cause of death of hypothermia, but you've used a little different phrase in some of your answers, and I want to make sure I got it right. Hypothermic considerations. Can you repeat what it was?
I said have hypothermic changes.
Hypothermic changes, and we agree that you can have hypothermic changes without a conclusion of hypothermia, correct?
No, hypothermic changes are what I'm referring to are actual things that I can see in the organs that are consistent with hypothermia. They're anatomic findings. They're things I can see with my eyes.
So you can, I'm sorry, did you finish?
And those changes suggest and are consistent with someone being hypothermic.
As you sit here now, with regard to, you used the phraseology consistent with hypothermia, signs of hypothermia, that's what I want to pursue just a little bit with regard to further information. We got started on this by asking whether you used the concept of differential diagnosis and hypotheses to determine the cause and manner of death. And you said in one of your answers that you relied upon law enforcement information, correct? Is that
Yes.
part of it? It was, you brought that up. You're the one who said you relied upon that, correct?
Yes.
And you've brought that up on your direct testimony and earlier in the cross. Is that correct, that you relied upon the investigation of law enforcement? So,
Sustained.
so now what I'd like to do is to ask you whether, using the concepts of differential diagnosis, scientific method, did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe could have died somewhere other than where the body was found and been moved and placed in the snow? Did you consider that?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Move along with this. We can approach in a bit.
Thank you. What, if any, alternative diagnoses did you apply to Mr. O'Keefe?
I don't understand your question.
What alternative scenarios did you look at, if any, for the cause or manner of death of Mr. O'Keefe?
I'll allow that question. What, if any?
At the time of the autopsy, I documented injuries and signs of hypothermia. I was provided with a set of circumstances, and at the end of the investigation, or at the end of my timeline. I concluded on the cause, but I did not conclude, or I did not determine a manner. The manner would be the circumstances you are speaking about, whether I considered other causes or circumstances. That's not how it works. I don't come up with hypothetical scenarios on how those injuries occur. I try to state the injuries, describe the injuries, state the cause of death and why that person died. And then I use all kinds of other investigative information that is provided to me to determine if I have enough to make a determination on the manner.
Did anyone provide to you any alternatives as to the finding of the body of Mr. O'Keefe in the snow?
Personally, to me, no.
Did you ask for any alternatives to the nature and location of the injury or death of Mr. O'Keefe?
I asked for all the information that was available.
Understood, but my question is, did you ask for any alternatives to the information that was provided to you as regards the location of the injuries? Did anyone provide you any alternatives to where the injuries could have occurred?
No.
So,
I'm going to let the answer stand. So the answer is no, so there's no evidence of that. So next question.
so you talked about the information you had at the time. What time is that?
The information at the time was a preliminary police report and verbal communications regarding the circumstances of how Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
And when I asked about the time, I'm not calendar time. Was this January, February, March, April of 2022?
The preliminary police report was on the day of the autopsy, and then information, I don't remember exactly how long, but in the weeks following, information was, coming in.
Do you have the ability to amend a death certificate?
Yes, I do.
And you can amend a certificate if you obtain further information with regard to the circumstances surrounding the death. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In your previous answers, you were talking about the information you had at the time. And I'm concluding that the latest act would be is April of 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
Have you obtained or been provided with further information? In other words, information after April of 2022 regarding the cause or manner of death?
What do you mean, have I been provided? Has someone physically provided me with a report on different circumstances?
Well, what I'm just talking about is any other information that you have received or considered in terms of the analysis with regard to the cause or manner of death.
Received in what way?
Here's what I'll do. I'll be a little more specific. What I want to do is to get at the head injury of the decedent, okay? Is it fair to say that the head injury, you called it a traumatic state what you phrase that as, because I want to use your phraseology.
Blunt impact injuries of the head.
So blunt impact injuries of the head. Is it fair to say that that was a very severe injury?
It was a severe injury, correct?
And would Mr. O'Keefe had been rendered unconscious nearly instantaneously with death following shortly thereafter?
It's very possible, yes.
Is it more than possible? Is it probable that that's what would have occurred?
I can't tell you how quickly he would have been rendered unconscious, but at some point after that injury, yes, he would have been rendered unconscious.
Is it possible he could have been rendered unconscious immediately?
So she's answered it this way. I think you need another person for that. Let's move on from that, Mr. Lessing.
You made your own determination of the cause of death, correct?
Yes, that's my job.
Understood. And what I want to do is to pursue the basis of your determination. So you used the phrase brain impact injury.
Blunt impact.
A blunt impact injury. Have I got that correct?
Blunt impact injuries of head, yes.
Of head, right. And that's your conclusion, correct?
Yes.
Based upon your conclusion, did you make any determination as to whether the decedent would be able to carry out any purposeful movement after that injury?
Define purposeful movement.
Sure. I'm talking about the ability to perhaps manipulate their hands.
I don't know.
Did you make any determination as to whether they would be able to engage in any cognitive functions, meaning processing things and making decisions?
I did not make that determination, no.
Did you observe any pattern to the injuries to the head of the decedent?
A pattern? I observed that there were injuries to the back of the head as well as other internal injuries to the base of the skull, as well as the brain.
Your Honor, if we could please publish, I'm just going to check to make sure they're in. If we could, Your Honor, publish 160 that is in evidence. But before we do, Mr. Wolf, I would like to approach Your Honor and let you know in case there's anything further that needs to be done. Thank you.
Is there? Did you show it to Mr. Brown?
It's already been agreed to as in evidence. and it
Okay.
is in evidence.
Oh, it's in evidence?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure if there was any statements that Your Honor wanted to make, and if not,
So why don't you come over here, because why don't you come over a second?
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. With Your Honor's permission, I would like to publish Exhibit 160.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Scordi-Bello, if you could please draw your attention to what is depicted on both screens. Pick whatever screen is most convenient for you. And what I want to do is to go over what is depicted there, and I'd like to start with just some basics. What is that white rectangle that is on the photograph?
This?
Yes.
That's a ruler.
And what's the purpose of the ruler?
To show a scale. When I measure the injury, I use the ruler to document that.
And if you could please draw your further attention to what I will refer to, and you use your own term, but just to start it, the horizontal line that is appears to be a laceration. You know what I'm referring to?
This, yes, this is a laceration.
Right, so it's fair to say that that's a laceration.
Correct.
And just so we get all that's depicted on this, you referred to earlier up above that, the red area. Is that an abrasion?
Yes.
And do you also denote to the left almost like a J-type item going vertically up? Yes, and going up. Do you see that?
Yeah, that I did not note that specifically. I just noted the whole injury as part of the abrasion.
That's my point. So you didn't make a separate note of what appears to be a J, and it might be easier to see it in the screen over there. It's your conclusion, but is it easier to see there?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, and so you didn't make a separate note as to what that was in your report, correct?
No, I did not.
Do you consider that an abrasion or something else?
I believe that's still an abrasion.
Do you conclude that that J is different in any manner from the abrasion that you've noted above the laceration?
I believe it could be part of the whole abrasion, or it could be something different.
Fair enough. Would a fall backwards on a flat frozen ground produce a circular and not a linear abrasion as depicted here on the back of an injured person's head?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Assume a fall backwards on a flat frozen ground. Would such a fall and impact present that type of pattern, or would it present a circular pattern, perhaps with something like a starfish in the middle?
I'll allow that. Can you answer that?
I can say that a fall backwards could very well produce that injury.
My question is more specific, and that is a fall backwards where the person impacts the back of their head on flat, frozen ground. Would you expect that type of a laceration from that type of a fall? Not just a general fall backwards, but specifically a fall backwards where the back of the head hits flat, frozen ground. Would you expect that?
I could, yes.
And under what circumstances could a laceration like that and an abrasion, all of it together, what circumstances could cause that type from a fall backwards on flat frozen ground?
Well, the laceration is due to the blunt impact, and so is the abrasion. The abrasion is friction. So depending on the type of surface, you mentioned flat frozen ground, it's quite possible to have an injury as the one depicted. There's nothing inconsistent with this injury and a fall on someone's, on the back of the head with a blunt surface.
Is there, are you familiar with the phrase pattern recognition in medicine?
Yes,
And isn't pattern recognition something that requires training with regard to being able to recognize certain patterns and determining what could be causing that pattern?
yes,
And just merely recognizing whether there is a pattern takes certain specialty training, etc.?
correct.
And isn't pattern recognition a principle that you apply in the medical examiner's office?
Yeah, we do.
And so example of pattern recognition could be a knife wound, correct?
Yes,
Could be a gunshot.
correct.
And there's certain patterns that you see on a decedent that can be consistent with those types of causes of injury, correct?
Correct.
Assuming a fall backwards onto frozen ground and there being on a lawn with grass, would you expect to see any grass at all in the injury site?
It's possible to have grass.
Is it possible to have well, are you familiar with the height and weight of the decedent generally? And if you need to look at your notes, please do so.
Yes. Mr. O'Keefe was approximately 6'1" and 216 pounds.
So, assuming a fall backwards and an impact to head on, a ground with grass, a person who's 6'1", there is going to be significant acceleration forces that occur as they're going backwards. Is that correct?
That's fair to say, yes.
And therefore, the more acceleration forces, usually there's a correlation with the force of the impact.
Correct.
And in terms of force of impact and assuming grass on the ground, would you, do you believe it's more probable than not that one would then see some grass on the head?
Sustained is that form.
Given what you testified regarding the height of Mr. O'Keefe, and assuming what I just gave to you as a fall backwards and acceleration and forces, would you expect to see anything else on the back of his head?
You have to be more specific than that.
Right. I thank you. So, would you expect to see? Is it possible, if that was the manner of the fall, that there should be grass on the head? Is that possible?
Sustained.
Did you consider at all in your evaluation well, let me back up. Do you see any evidence of grass in this depiction?
No, I do not.
Did you recall ever seeing any evidence of grass when you were performing the autopsy?
I did not see evidence of grass.
Did you consider at all in performing your autopsy whether or not grass should be present given what was reported to you by law enforcement.
Sustained.
Did you make any considerations at all regarding grass in regard to your autopsy report?
I did not see any grass. No, I did not make any determinations.
And was grass at all even a consideration in your analysis?
I had very limited information as to the exact nature of the surface at the time of autopsy.
So the answer is no to that
No.
question. Thank you. Did you have any information regarding the circumstances that you said you look at in trying to determine manner of death as to whether there were any stones or rocks around the scene?
That I did not have any information.
So meaning you didn't have any information, you saw no information that there were any stones or rocks by the scene, is that correct?
Sustained in that form.
What, if any, consideration did you make in your assessment of cause and manner of death with regard to stones or rocks?
I did not make any.
With regard to any other potential causes other than ground, did you consider any other possibilities that could cause the type of injuries that are depicted on the screen?
There's a number of possibilities that could cause the injury.
My question is, did you consider, not whether there are, but whether you considered them at the time you were performing the autopsy?
I'm always considering at the time of autopsy what could have caused a certain injury.
Did you put in your notes or your autopsy report any of those considerations? Are they documented?
No.
Now, in terms of differential diagnosis that we talked about, did you determine whether there were any other possible explanations for the injuries to the decedent other than what law enforcement presented to you?
I'll allow that.
Internally, I consider all kinds of other explanations. I have to look at the findings and the possible ways that those injuries could have been sustained and decide whether I have enough information and whether I am satisfied with the information that I have in order to conclude or determine a manner.
Did you make any notes at all about the considerations you were just speaking about, other considerations, any notes whatsoever in any document in your autopsy report?
Not in my autopsy report, no.
Did you make any other notes of those considerations in any document that you created for this case at all?
No, these are considerations that I've had and discussions I've had with colleagues in terms of evaluating these injuries and...
And I don't want you to go into what other people said, but I want you to finish your answer.
Right, no, I did not make physical notes of my considerations.
Your Honor, I'm going into a different category, so I just wanted to alert Your Honor to it.
All right. And